The click of my heels echoed through the marble foyer as I stepped into my home, the scent of success clinging to me like expensive perfume. Another day, another deal closed. I was riding high on the wave of my latest business triumph, ready to celebrate with a glass of Chardonnay and a long hot bath. But as I rounded the corner into my living room, my world tilted on its axis. "Hello, Emma." The deep, familiar voice sent a chill down my spine. There, lounging on my cream leather sofa as if he owned the place, sat Ethan, my ex-husband, the man I'd thought I'd never have to see again. I froze, my hand still on the light switch. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ethan's lips curled into that infuriating smirk I used to find so charming. Now, it just made my blood boil. "Now, is that any way to greet your former better half?" "It is when said better half breaks into my house," I snapped, dropping my briefcase and crossing my arms. "I'll ask you one more time. What are you doing here?" Ethan stood, his tall frame unfolding like a predator ready to pounce. "I'm here to discuss the house, actually. Alice and I want to move in." The name hit me like a slap. Alice, my sister. The woman Ethan had left me for. "You've got to be kidding me." "I assure you I'm not." Ethan's eyes gleamed with a hint of malice. "We figure it's only fair. After all, you couldn't give me what I wanted. What was the point of this big, beautiful house if it was never going to be filled with the pitter-patter of little feet?" My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "Get out!" I hissed. "Come on, Emma. Be reasonable. You're obviously doing well for yourself." He gestured to my designer suit. "Surely you can afford to move somewhere more suitable for a single, childless woman?" The words stung more than I cared to admit. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I said, "Get out. Now, before I call the police." Ethan held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. No need to get nasty. We'll discuss this another time, when you're feeling more cooperative." He sauntered towards the door, pausing as he passed me. "You know, Emma, this stubbornness of yours is exactly why things didn't work out between us. Well, that and your shortcomings." As the door slammed behind him, I sagged against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. The nerve of that man, the absolute gall. To show up here in my home, demanding I give it up for him and my traitor of a sister. And those cruel jabs about my supposed infertility. I pushed myself upright, fury replacing shock. Oh, Ethan had no idea what he'd just started. If he thought I was going to roll over and let him and Alice take what was mine, he had another thing coming. I stalked to my home office, yanking open the bottom drawer of my desk. There, nestled among old files and forgotten paperwork, was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out, running my fingers over the embossed logo of my lawyer's firm. Inside were the deed to the house, ironclad and in my name alone, along with other documents I'd hoped never to need. But Ethan had forced my hand. As I spread the papers across my desk, a grim smile spread across my face. Let the games begin, I thought. "You want a war, Ethan? I'll give you a war, and this time I won't lose." I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as Ethan's words echoed in my head. By morning I was a bundle of nerves and determination. I needed to act fast. My first stop, my lawyer's office. "Emma, what a surprise," Richard said, ushering me into his plush office. "What brings you here so early?" I slapped the manila folder on his desk. "Ethan's back, and he wants the house." Richard's eyebrows shot up. "I see. Well, let's take a look, shall we?" As he pored over the documents, I paced the room, my mind racing. How dare Ethan think he could waltz back into my life and demand anything? And with Alice of all people? "Well, Emma," Richard's voice snapped me back to attention. "I have good news and bad news." I braced myself. "Give it to me straight." "The good news is, the house is legally yours. Ethan has no claim to it whatsoever." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "And the bad news?" Richard's face grew serious. "The bad news is, if Ethan's willing to try this, he might not stop here. We need to be prepared for other potential attacks." My stomach churned. "What kind of attacks? Financial, legal, personal? It's hard to say. But given your history, and the fact that he's involved with your sister, things could get messy." I sank into a chair, suddenly feeling every bit of my age. "God, Richard, how did I get here?" His eyes softened. "Emma, may I speak frankly?" I nodded, bracing myself. "You're one of the strongest women I know. You built an empire from nothing after Ethan left you. Don't let him shake you now. His words hit home and I felt a spark of my old fire returning. You're right. I've worked too hard to let him take anything from me now. As I left Richard's office, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Café Noir, 1 p.m., Alice. My sister, the betrayer. My hand shook as I typed a reply. Fine. The cafe was bustling when I arrived, but I spotted Alice immediately. She hadn't changed much, still beautiful, still with that air of innocence that had always driven me crazy. Emma, she said, standing as I approached. Thank you for coming. I sat down, not bothering with pleasantries. What do you want, Alice? She flinched at my tone. I wanted to explain. About Ethan. About the house. There's nothing to explain. I cut her off. You betrayed me. Both of you did, and now you have the audacity to demand my home. It's not like that, Alice pleaded. Ethan, he's not well, Emma. He's desperate. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Not my problem. But it is. Alice's voice rose, drawing stares from nearby tables. She lowered it to a whisper. He's dying, Emma. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? Cancer. Stage 4. He wanted to make things right before. She trailed off, tears in her eyes. For a moment, just a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered all the pain, all the sleepless nights, all the tears I'd shed because of them. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice steady. But it doesn't change anything. The house is mine. End of story. I stood to leave, but Alice grabbed my arm. Please, Emma, for old time's sake, for family. I yanked my arm away, fury rising in my chest. Family? You gave up the right to call me family when you slept with my husband. As I stormed out of the cafe, my phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Ethan. I know Alice told you. Please, Emma, I need to see you. One last time. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. What should I do? The rational part of me said to ignore it, to protect myself. But another part, a part I thought long dead, whispered of closure, of answers long overdue. With a deep breath, I made my decision and began to type. I sat in my car, staring at the familiar facade of the diner where Ethan and I had our first date. My fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as memories flooded back, unbidden and unwelcome. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked inside. The bell above the door chimed, just as it had all those years ago. Ethan was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When he raised his eyes to meet mine, I saw a flicker of the man I once loved. Emma, he said, his voice rough. Thank you for coming. I slid into the booth across from him, my guard up. You said you wanted to talk, so talk. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I'm dying, Emma. I don't have much time left, and I want to make things right. Make things right? I scoffed. You think you can undo years of pain and betrayal with one conversation? No, of course not, he said quickly, but I thought maybe we could start with the truth. I leaned back, crossing my arms. The truth? That's rich, coming from you. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. I know, I've been a coward, but please, Emma, let me explain. Against my better judgment, I nodded. When we were together, I was scared of commitment, scared of the future. And when we couldn't conceive, I used it as an excuse. I blamed you because it was easier than facing my own fears. I felt a lump forming in my throat. And Alice? Ethan looked down, shame etched on his face. Alice was a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake. She was there, she was easy, and I was weak. You broke my heart, I whispered, surprised by the raw emotion in my voice. I know, Ethan said, reaching across the table. I pulled my hand away before he could touch it. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life, which, as it turns out, isn't very long. I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly squashed by years of hurt. What do you want from me, Ethan? Forgiveness? Absolution? He shook his head. No, I don't deserve either of those things. I wanted you to know the truth, and I wanted to apologize for everything. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. The house, I said finally. Why now? Ethan's face crumpled. It's not for me. It's for Alice. I wanted to leave her something, some security. I felt a flash of anger. So you thought you'd take it from me again? I wasn't thinking straight, Ethan admitted. I was desperate. But I see now how wrong I was. The house is yours, Emma. It always should have been. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Everything okay? Lucy's asking for you. Reality crashed back in. My husband, my daughter, my life now. I stood abruptly. I have to go. Ethan looked up, a mix of sadness and understanding in his eyes. Of course. Thank you for listening, Emma. It means more than you know. As I turned to leave, he called out, Emma? I paused, not turning back. I truly am sorry for everything, and I'm glad you found happiness. You deserve it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked out of the diner. As the door closed behind me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The past was the past. I had a future to focus on. But as I drove home, a nagging thought persisted. If Ethan was telling the truth about his illness, what did that mean for Alice? And more importantly, what did it mean for me? I pulled into my driveway, my mind whirling. As I reached for the door handle, I froze. There, on my front porch, stood Alice. And she wasn't alone. A young boy, no more than 5 or 6, clung to her hand, a boy with Ethan's eyes and my sister's smile. Emma, Alice said, her voice trembling. There's something I need to tell you. I stood frozen, staring at Alice and the boy on my porch. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Emma, please, Alice pleaded. Can we come in? I promise I'll explain everything. Against my better judgment, I nodded and unlocked the door. As they stepped inside, I caught a whiff of Alice's familiar perfume, mixed with the scent of crayons and fruit snacks that seemed to cling to all young children. Who's this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alice took a deep breath. This is Ethan Jr. He's your nephew. The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. My nephew? Yes, Alice said, her eyes brimming with tears. He's 5 years old, and he's the reason I'm here. I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. I don't understand. Why now? Why are you telling me this now? Alice knelt down next to Ethan Jr., smoothing his hair. Sweetie, why don't you go play with your tablet in the living room while Mommy talks to Aunt Emma? The boy nodded and scampered off, leaving Alice and me alone in the kitchen. Emma, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, Alice began. But with Ethan, with his condition, I'm scared. I don't know how I'm going to take care of EJ on my own. I felt a surge of anger. So what, you thought you'd come here and use your son to manipulate me? To get the house? No, Alice cried. That's not it at all. I need your help, Emma. You're the only family we have left. I laughed bitterly. Family? You destroyed our family when you slept with my husband. I know, Alice whispered, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please, Emma, this isn't about me. It's about EJ. He's innocent in all of this. I stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and underneath it all, a tiny spark of curiosity about the nephew I never knew I had. Why didn't you tell me before? I demanded. 5 years, Alice. You kept this from me for 5 years. Alice hung her head. I was ashamed and scared. Ethan, he didn't want anyone to know. He said it would complicate things. Complicate things? I scoffed. As if they weren't complicated enough already. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. On my way home with Lucy. Everything okay? Reality came crashing back. My husband, my daughter, my life now. How could I explain this to them? You need to leave, I said, my voice shaking. I can't deal with this right now. Alice stood, her eyes pleading. Emma, please. I know I have no right to ask, but... You're right, I cut her off. You don't have any right to ask, not after everything you've done. As if on cue, Ethan Jr. came bounding back into the kitchen. Mommy, can we go home now? I'm hungry. I looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. He had Ethan's eyes, but Alice's smile, and something else, something that reminded me of myself at that age. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Wait, I said, just as Alice was gathering her things. I need time to process all this, but I can't just turn my back on family, even if that family has hurt me. Alice's eyes widened with hope. What are you saying? I took a deep breath. I'm saying, let's talk, really talk, about everything, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. As Alice nodded, tears streaming down her face, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Mark and Lucy were home. I steeled myself for what was sure to be the most difficult conversation of my life. But as I looked at Ethan Jr.'s innocent face, I knew I had to try. For his sake, if nothing else. Come on, I said, gesturing to the living room. We have a lot to discuss. The days following Alice's revelation blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and tense conversations. Mark was understanding, if not a little shocked, but Lucy was too young to fully grasp the situation. I found myself torn between my past and present, struggling to reconcile the two. One particularly grueling day at work, I sat in my office, staring blankly at my computer screen. The numbers on the quarterly report swam before my eyes, refusing to make sense. A knock on my door jolted me back to reality. "Come in," I called, straightening up. My assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Miss Thompson, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." My heart skipped a beat. "Who is it?" "He says his name is Ethan." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Send him in," I heard myself say, even as my mind screamed in protest. Ethan walked in, looking even more haggard than the last time I'd seen him. The cancer was taking its toll. "Emma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What do you want, Ethan?" He sat down heavily, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know Alice told you about EJ. I wanted to explain." "Explain?" I scoffed. "Explain how you kept my nephew a secret for 5 years, how you're trying to use him to manipulate me now." Ethan flinched. "It's not like that. I made mistakes, Emma. Terrible mistakes. But EJ, he's innocent in all this." "So I've been told," I said coldly. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Ethan continued. "I know I don't deserve it, but I am asking you to consider helping Alice and EJ after I'm gone." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Why should I?" "Because despite everything, you're a good person, Emma. Better than I ever was." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And because I have something to offer in return." My eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This is the deed to my family's vacation property in the mountains. It's worth a considerable amount. I want you to have it." I stared at the paper, my mind reeling. "Why?" "Consider it restitution," Ethan said. "For everything I put you through. Use it, sell it, do whatever you want with it. But please, just consider helping Alice and EJ." As I reached for the document, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Emergency at Lucy's school. Can you come?" Panic gripped me. "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. Ethan nodded, rising slowly. "Just think about it, Emma. That's all I ask." I rushed out of the office, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. By the time I reached Lucy's school, I was a mess of anxiety and confusion. The principal met me at the door. "Miss Thompson, thank you for coming so quickly." "What happened? Is Lucy okay?" I demanded. "She's fine, but there was an incident. Lucy got into a fight with another student." I blinked in disbelief. "Lucy? My Lucy?" The principal nodded gravely. "She was defending a younger boy who was being bullied. When we asked her why she did it, she said she was protecting her cousin." My world tilted on its axis. How did Lucy know about EJ? As I walked into the principal's office, I saw my daughter sitting there, her chin held high despite the tear tracks on her cheeks. In that moment, looking at her fierce determination, I saw myself. I saw Alice. I saw the strength that ran through our family, despite everything. And I knew what I had to do. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and dialed Alice's number. It was time to face the past and forge a new future. For all of us. The office felt like a pressure cooker, tension thick in the air as I stared down Ethan across my desk. His gaunt face was a stark reminder of his illness, but the fire in his eyes burned as bright as ever. "You can't be serious," I hissed, gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. "After everything, you have the audacity to come here and demand this?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Emma, please, you have to understand. I'm dying. I need to know Alice and EJ will be taken care of." "And that's my responsibility. How?" I shot back, fury rising in my chest. "You made your choices, Ethan. You and Alice both." He ran a hand through his thinning hair, frustration etched on his face. "I know I have no right to ask, but—" "You're damn right you don't." I cut him off. "You blamed me for years, Ethan. Made me feel like I was less of a woman because we couldn't have children. And now you want me to take care of your love child?" Ethan's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that. I was scared, Emma. Scared of failing as a father, scared of the future. I lashed out at you because it was easier than facing my own fears." I laughed bitterly. "And that makes it okay. You destroyed our marriage, Ethan. You and Alice both." "I know," he whispered. and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, which, as it turns out, isn't very long. A pang of sympathy shot through me, quickly squashed by years of pent-up anger. What do you want from me, Ethan? He took a deep breath. I want you to let Alice and EJ move into the house. It's big enough for all of you. You could be a family again. I stared at him, incredulous. A family? Are you out of your mind? I have a family, Ethan. Mark and Lucy are my family now. But EJ is your blood, Emma. Your nephew. Don't you want to know him? The words hit me like a physical blow. I thought of Lucy, fiercely defending her cousin at school, of the little boy with Ethan's eyes and Alice's smile. Despite everything, a part of me did want to know him. But the cost was too high. I can't, I said, my voice breaking. I won't uproot my life, my daughter's life, for this. It's too much, Ethan. His face hardened. Then I'm sorry, Emma, but I have no choice. I'm going to fight you for the house. It's rightfully mine, and I'll prove it in court if I have to. Panic gripped me. You wouldn't dare. Watch me, he growled, standing up. I may not have much time left, but I'll use every second to make sure Alice and EJ are provided for, even if it means taking everything from you. As he stormed out of my office, I collapsed into my chair, my mind reeling. How had it come to this? How had my life spiraled so out of control in just a matter of days? My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Everything okay? You've been at the office late all week. Guilt washed over me. I hadn't told Mark about Ethan's visit, about his threats. I'd been trying to handle it all on my own, just like I always did. But as I stared at the message, I realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. I needed Mark. I needed my family. With shaking hands, I dialed his number. Mark, can you come to the office? There's something I need to tell you. As I waited for him to arrive, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. Whatever happened next, whatever Ethan threw at us, we'd face it together. Because that's what real family does. And I'd be damned if I let Ethan take that away from me again. The doorbell rang, shattering the fragile peace of our Sunday afternoon. Mark and I exchanged a look of dread. We knew who it was. I'll get it, I said, squeezing Mark's hand. Stay with Lucy. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There stood Ethan and Alice, looking like ghosts from my past come to haunt me. Emma, Ethan began, his voice raspy. We need to talk. I stood my ground, blocking the entrance. There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. I told you at the office, I'm not giving up this house. Alice stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Please, Emma, just hear us out, for EJ's sake. The mention of my nephew sent a pang through my heart, but I steeled myself. You don't get to use that child as a bargaining chip. Mommy? Lucy's voice came from behind me. Who's at the door? I turned to see my daughter standing there, curiosity etched on her face. Mark appeared behind her, his expression a mix of concern and determination. Lucy, honey, go back inside, I said gently, but it was too late. Ethan's eyes widened as he took in the sight of my daughter. You have a child? The shock in his voice ignited a fire in me. Yes, Ethan. I have a daughter, a family, a life that doesn't include you or your drama. Alice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But how? I thought. You thought wrong, I snapped. Both of you did. You blamed me for years, made me feel like less of a woman, and now you have the audacity to come here and demand my home? Mark stepped forward, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. I think it's time for you both to leave. Ethan's face contorted with a mix of emotions, anger, confusion, and something that looked almost like regret. This changes nothing, Emma. I still have a right to that house, for Alice and EJ. You have no rights here, Mark said, his voice low and dangerous. This is our home, our family. And if you don't leave now, I'll call the police. For a moment, I thought Ethan might lunge at Mark, but then his shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm dying. I just want to make things right. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. You can't make this right, Ethan. Some things can't be fixed. Alice stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. What about EJ? He's your family, too. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. My little sister who had once been my best friend. Family doesn't betray each other, Alice. You both made your choices. Now you have to live with them. With that, I closed the door, shutting out the ghosts of my past. I turned to face Mark and Lucy, my real family, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Mommy? Lucy asked, her voice small. Was that my uncle? I knelt down, pulling her into a hug. It's complicated, sweetheart. But you don't need to worry about it. As I held my daughter, I caught Mark's eye over her shoulder. The love and support I saw there gave me strength. But even as I embraced my family, I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's defeated face, or the thought of the nephew I'd never known. The past and present collided in that moment, leaving me torn between the life I'd built and the family I'd left behind. As night fell, I found myself staring out the window, wondering if I'd made the right choice. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The letter arrived on a crisp autumn morning, its official seal mocking me from the kitchen counter. I knew what it contained before I even opened it, Ethan's final attempt to claim what was never his. Mark found me an hour later, still staring at the unopened envelope. "Emma," he said softly, "whatever it is, we'll face it together." His words gave me the courage to tear it open. As I read, my hands began to shake. "He's suing us," I whispered. "Ethan's suing for the house. He claims it was part of our original divorce settlement." Mark's face hardened. "That's impossible. We have the deed. I know, but—" My voice broke. "He's dying, Mark. This is his last-ditch effort to provide for Alice and EJ. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Sarah. Ethan's old assistant. There's something you need to know. Can we meet?" An hour later, I sat across from Sarah in a quiet cafe, my heart pounding. "Ethan lied," she said without preamble, "about everything." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "The affair with Alice, it wasn't what you think. Alice came to the office that day to confront Ethan about his gambling debts. He'd been embezzling company funds to cover them. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I saw them together." "You saw what Ethan wanted you to see," Sarah explained. "He staged it, knowing you'd divorce him. It was his way out, to avoid facing the consequences of his actions." My mind reeled. All these years, the pain, the self-doubt. And Alice. EJ. Sarah's eyes filled with sympathy. Alice agreed to play along to protect the family name. But EJ, Emma, EJ isn't Ethan's son. He's Alice's from a previous relationship. Ethan is sterile. He always was. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ethan's cruel words about my supposed infertility echoed in my mind, all lies. I left the cafe in a daze, my feet carrying me to the one place I knew I needed to go, Alice's apartment. She opened the door, surprise etched on her face. "Emma, what are you?" "Is it true?" I cut her off. "About Ethan? About EJ?" Alice's face crumpled. In that moment, she wasn't my betrayer. She was my little sister again, scared and vulnerable. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I wanted to tell you so many times, but Ethan..." I pulled her into a fierce hug, years of hurt and anger melting away. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's over now." Later that evening, I sat with Mark and Lucy, explaining everything. Lucy's eyes widened with each revelation. "So, EJ is really my cousin?" she asked. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart, and I think it's time we all got to know him." Mark squeezed my hand. "What about Ethan's lawsuit?" I took a deep breath. I'm going to drop it, all of it. The house, the resentment, the past. It's time to build something new. The next day, I called my lawyer and had him draw up new papers. The house would be put in a trust for EJ's future, with Alice as the trustee. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As I watched Lucy and EJ play in the backyard, their laughter filling the air, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The ghosts of my past no longer haunted me. Instead, I saw the promise of a future, one filled with family, love, and second chances. Ethan's betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also led me here, to a life richer and more fulfilling than I could have imagined. As I joined Mark on the porch, his arm wrapping around me, I knew that this moment, this family, was worth every tear, every struggle. The sun set on my old life, and I welcomed the dawn of a new chapter, one where forgiveness, compassion, and love would light the way forward. The tension in the dining room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I sat across from Harlan, my estranged husband, trying to keep my emotions in check as he droned on about his grand plans. "This luxury rehab center is going to put our little town on the map," he proclaimed, that slimy grin plastered across his face. "I've got investors lining up to be a part of it." My hands clenched under the table. Of course, his big idea involved lining his own pockets, not caring whose lives he disrupted in the process. But Harlan, I interjected, struggling to remain calm, that farmhouse has been in my family for generations. My parents' whole lives were spent tending to that land. You can't just tear it down. Dax and Ivy, my teenage kids, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was the kind of drama no child should have to witness between their parents, but Harlan seemed oblivious to their discomfort. Harlan scoffed, fixing me with that conniving glare that made my skin crawl. Your parents' legacy? He spat. More like a dilapidated money pit holding us back. I've got the chance to finally do something worthwhile with that property. My blood boiled at his cavalier dismissal of everything that house represented to me. My childhood, my roots, my parents' life's work. All he could see was dollar signs. It's not just about money, I exploded, slamming my palm on the table. Dax and Ivy jumped in their seats. That farmhouse is our family heritage. It means something. Yeah? Harlan's lips curled into a sneer. Well, it's my name on the deed, which means I get to make the calls around here. This rehab center is happening whether you like it or not. Those words felt like a punch to the gut. When had the man I married become such a self-absorbed, greedy bastard? I opened my mouth to protest further, but the dejected looks on Dax and Ivy's faces stopped me. As much as I wanted to continue fighting, I didn't want to put them through any more of this toxic drama tonight. I pushed back from the table, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. You know what, Harlan? Do whatever you want, but don't expect any support from me on this. Snatching up my purse, I stormed out of the dining room, the muffled sound of Harlan's laughter echoing behind me. My fists clenched at my sides as I fought back angry tears. He thought he had won this battle, but he was gravely mistaken. That old farmhouse represented everything my parents had built through decades of back-breaking work. The roots, the memories, the soul of our family. I wouldn't stand by and let Harlan's greed destroy it all in the name of profiting off people's suffering. Not without one hell of a fight. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Harlan was being uncharacteristically low-key, no doubt trying to avoid another blue-owning match after our disastrous dinner. But I knew that smug snake was just biding his time, waiting for the right moment to slither forward with his precious rehab center plans. I wasn't about to just sit back and take it, though. If he thought he could bulldoze over my family's legacy so easily, he had another thing coming. It started with little things at first. Reevaluating our finances, I noticed irregularities, strange transfers, payments to unfamiliar companies. Confronting Harlan only led to him lashing out, accusing me of nagging and not trusting him. It's basic business dealings, Alara. Not that you'd understand anything about building an empire. Those words stung, but I tried not to let it show. This has nothing to do with trust, Harlan. I'm simply asking where our money is going. He brushed me off with a demeaning chortle. Don't worry that pretty little head of yours. Just let me handle things, okay, dear? The way he always talked down to me, treating me like a clueless child rather than his wife, it made my blood boil. But I knew pushing further would only lead to another explosive argument, so I bottled up my anger. For now. Then came the night I overheard Harlan's conversation with his sleazeball buddy Travis. I'll never forget the smugness in his tone as he bragged about bleeding me dry. Once I've transferred the deed over solely to my name, Alara won't be able to do a damn thing. That little nuisance will be out of the picture for good. My heart stopped. He was planning on cutting me out completely, leaving me with nothing while he tore down my parents' legacy to build his tacky rehab palace. In that moment, any shed of respect or love I'd had left for Harlan evaporated. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. He wasn't just being greedy and inconsiderate, he was being malicious and cruel. Using our marriage vows as a weapon to steal from me and erase everything my family had built. I wanted nothing more than to burst into that room and unleash the fury building up inside me. To scream, to rage, to make him feel 1 ounce of the hurt he was inflicting on me. But I didn't. As the weight of Harlan's betrayal threatened to crush me, a strange calmness washed over me instead. Screaming would only give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten under my skin. No, I would be strong. I would be smart. If he wanted to wage war, then war was what he'd get. Quietly, I retreated back down the hall before either of those snakes could spot me eavesdropping. They thought they were so clever, but they had no idea what was coming for them. A faint smile played across my lips as their chortling laughter echoed behind me. In that moment, I made a vow to myself. Using every ounce of my intelligence and determination, I would take that smug snake Harlan down. He wanted to play dirty? I'd bury him. The next morning, I called a family meeting with Dax and Ivy. It was time to lay everything out on the table and bring them into the fight. "Your father has been lying to us," I stated bluntly as we gathered in the living room. "He's been secretly plotting to take full control of the farmhouse property." Ivy's eyes widened in shock, but Dax just frowned and nodded slowly. I knew something shady was going on. I overheard him on the phone the other night arguing about handling the Alara situation. My heart clenched hearing my own name being treated like a mere obstacle to be overcome. Harlan's deceit cut deeper than I could have imagined. He's aiming to cut me out completely so he can demolish the farmhouse for his rehab center ambitions. Without any legal claim, there's nothing I can do to stop him. Dax slammed his fist on the couch cushion. "That lying bastard! After everything you sacrificed for this family while he was off chasing get-rich-quick schemes, he doesn't deserve." He trailed off, anger causing his voice to shake. "We can't let him get away with this," Ivy stated firmly, conviction burning in her eyes. "Mom, that farmhouse is your heritage. Grandma and Grandpa's life was in those lands. We have to protect it." Hearing the determination in my daughter's voice, I felt a surge of pride mix with the simmering fury towards Harlan. She may have been young, but Ivy understood the importance of not letting our family history be erased. "You're absolutely right," I declared, straightening my back. "Which is why I need both of you on board with taking Harlan down. We're going to expose every last one of his underhanded tactics." Dax raised an eyebrow skeptically. "And just how do you plan on doing that? Pretty sure dear old Dad has his shady business dealings locked up tighter than Fort Knox." A grim smile crossed my lips. "Let's just say I have some tricks up my sleeve, too. Starting with carefully documenting every inconsistency I find in our finances, no matter how small. Harlan always was sloppy about covering his tracks completely." I proceeded to lay out the start of my plan, meticulously building an evidence trail of Harlan's financial manipulation, from questionable payments and transfers to the shady characters he was courting as rehab center investors. Dax was put in charge of thoroughly combing through all communication records, emails, texts, phone calls, looking for any trace of Harlan's deceitful intentions and dealings. Ivy, ever the tech genius, would backtrack all digital money movements to ensure we caught every inconsistency. With her skills, even Harlan's feeble efforts at coding expenses wouldn't be able to hide from us. As we finalized assigning roles and responsibilities, a new sense of determination filled the room. Harlan had clearly underestimated just how ferociously we would fight to take him down. Big mistake. "This is going to be one hell of a battle," Dax mused grimly. I met his gaze, letting the full force of my resolve burn through. "Then it's a good thing he messed with the wrong family. Harlan wanted a war. He'll get one he never saw coming. With a united front, we shook on our pact. There would be no more holding back. Harlan had awoken a vengeful force he couldn't possibly comprehend. Everything he'd worked towards was about to unravel by his own narcissistic greed. Let the games begin. A few days later, I finally worked up the nerve to confront Harlan directly about his betrayal. I'd spent too many nights stewing in anger, imagining all the ways I could rip him a new one. But I needed to play this confrontation carefully if I wanted to catch him off guard. "Harlan, we need to talk," I stated firmly as I entered the den, jaw clenched in determination. He barely looked up from his laptop, offering a dismissive grunt. "What is it now, Alara? I'm kind of busy here." I could feel my temper already starting to flare at his indifference, but I took a steadying breath. "Don't take the bait. Not yet." "Too busy to discuss your secret dealings to cut me out of the farmhouse deed?" I asked, carefully watching his expression. That seemed to finally get his attention. Harlan's head snapped up, his brow furrowing in that familiar look of faux innocence he used when caught in a lie. "What are you talking about? There are no secret dealings." I leveled him with a cold stare. "Don't play dumb with me, Harlan. I know all about your pathetic schemes to take full control of my family's property behind my back." For a split second, I saw a flicker of panic flash across his features before the mask of indignation slid back into place. "Alara, you're being completely irrational right now." "Can it, Harlan?" My composure finally snapped as I slammed my palms on the desk, causing him to flinch back in his chair. "I know you've been manipulating the finances, chatting up shady investors, all so you can demolish that farmhouse for your precious little vanity rehab project." Harlan opened his mouth, no doubt to spew more lies and feeble justifications. But I wasn't having any of it, not this time. "You make me sick," I snarled, all the rage and anguish I'd been bottling up finally boiling over. Planning to tear down a piece of my family's legacy all along, lying to my face every step of the way. "You're nothing but a selfish, immoral snake." He recoiled slightly at the venom in my words, then quickly straightened as that cocky, condescending sneer spread across his lips. Well, looks like the little woman has finally grown some claws. But you don't scare me, Alara. Not even close." Despite the bravado, I could detect a slight quiver of uncertainty in his voice. Good, he should be worried. "You think you've got everything all figured out, don't you?" Harlan leaned back with a contemptuous chuckle. "Newsflash, Princess, I don't need your approval or permission to do anything with that property. It's mine, fair and square." My blood boiled at his arrogance. Did he really think underhanded manipulation made his claim fair? But before I could retort, he was leaning towards me with that soulless grin that made my skin crawl. "In fact, you're the one who's about to get a rude wake-up call," he promised in a low, silky tone. "I've got everything legally locked up tighter than a drum. By the time I'm through, you're going to be the one left with nothing while I build my empire." We were practically nose to nose now, his putrid breath washing over me as he hissed out the final threat. "You think you can take me on, sweetheart? By all means, try. But don't be surprised when I bury you along with your precious little memories. It's going to be a bloodbath, and I'm going to enjoy every second of watching you lose everything." Hatred burned in my chest, barely contained rage roiling within me at his vicious, vindictive words. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to unleash the full force of my fury upon this wretched, soulless man I'd once loved, but I didn't. Slowly, I straightened up and took a step back, returning his venom-filled glare with a calm, level look. "You seem pretty confident, don't you, Harlan?" I stated, my voice dangerously even. "We'll see how long that smug smile lasts once the truth about your shady dealings comes to light. You wanted a war? You're going to get one." Giving him one final look of pure, undisguised disgust, I turned and strode from the den, my high heels clicking determinedly against the hardwood. Harlan may have thought he held all the cards, but he had hugely underestimated me. The game was on now, and I fully intended to be the last one standing when the dust cleared. After my explosive showdown with Harlan, I knew I needed to take our fight to the next level. As much as Dax and Ivy's support bolstered my determination, we couldn't take Harlan down alone. We needed reinforcements. First on my list was my best friend Alicia, a sharp-tongued lawyer who had been watching this whole saga unfold with disdain for my snake of a husband. As expected, she jumped at the chance to help take Harlan down a peg. "That scumbag has had this coming for a long time," Alicia said with relish when I looped her in on our scheme. "Just tell me what kind of legal roadblocks we need to throw his way." Her wolfish grin was one I'd seen many times before, usually right before she went for the jugular in court. Harlan wouldn't know what hit him once we sicked Alicia's legal prowess on his shoddy cover-ups. Next, I reached out to some of my oldest friends from my nursing days, Jacqueline, Maria, and Sandy. While we had drifted apart over the years due to work and raising families, they were still the most loyal, iron-willed women I knew. When I laid out the battle plan, how Harlan aimed to destroy my family legacy in his ruthless pursuit of profits, their reactions were awe-inspiring blend of outrage and grim determination. "Say no more, girl," Jacqueline stated, pulling me into a bear hug. "That bastard's not going to know what hit him when we're done rallying the troops." Sandy cracked her knuckles meaningfully. "I've been waiting years to give that smug prick a piece of my mind, count me in." Maria simply nodded, her jaw set in a hard line. "Para la familia. Let's burn that cabron to the ground." With a fiercely loyal crew now assembled, the real planning began. We'd hit Harlan from every angle possible. Alicia laying the groundwork for our legal offensive, while Jacqueline and the others used their vast network of contacts in our small town to rally public opinion solidly against him. Harlan may have his pockets lined with cash, but we've got the most powerful weapons of all, the truth and the will of the people, Alicia declared. Once we expose every last one of his shady schemes, he won't be able to show his weaselly face in this town again. Over the next few days, the fight was taken to Harlan on all fronts. Damning documents and financial records detailing his fraud were anonymously leaked to the local press. Community meetings were organized to rally support for protecting my family's legacy at all costs against Harlan's ambitions. Scathing social media campaigns exposing what a con artist he truly was began spreading like wildfire. At the same time, Alicia was working every back door to halt permits and dispute property claims, throwing up every possible legal roadblock to Harlan's rehab center dreams, while we dug up more concrete evidence of his lies and manipulation. As the townsfolk turned decisively against Harlan and his partners started growing nervous over the mounting allegations, you could practically smell the desperation rolling off that weasel. He knew he was losing his grip on the situation, but was too proud and arrogant to gracefully admit defeat. Which was exactly what we wanted. The slimy rat backed into a corner, scrabbling for any advantage as we slowly tightened the vice around his schemes. Of course, the attacks and libelous claims started flying once Harlan realized what an impenetrable defense we had formed. Cries of modern-day witch hunt and embellished accusations that I had grifted money in retaliation were aimed at trying to sow seeds of doubts, but we stood united against the onslaught. Harlan could grasp at whatever pitiful straws of denial he wanted. In a matter of days, we had already dismantled most of his rehab center plans while simultaneously turning almost the entire town against him. He's getting desperate. I noted to Dax and Ivy as news dropped of another one of Harlan's investors pulling out amidst the cloud of suspicion. Getting sloppy, too. My lips curved into a thin, predatory smile, which means his defenses are finally cracking open for our killing strike. Watch closely, kids. This is how we draw the venom from a snake before going in for the kill. The battle was far from over, but the war had finally swung in our favor, and I was going to savor every well-deserved second of Harlan's downfall. It all came to a head at the community center meeting Alicia had organized. Creating a media spectacle was her specialty, and this was shaping up to be her magnum opus of public lashings. As I entered the packed auditorium that night, the stuffy air was thick with anticipation and accusation. All eyes turned towards me, hushed murmurs filling the space as I made my way to the front. The townspeople had gotten wind that explosive revelations about Harlan were coming, and you could feel the thirst for blood in the air. I wasn't alone, however. Dax, Ivy, Alicia, and my former nursing crew stood in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder, as we ascended the stage. We were bathed in the harsh spotlight when I finally stepped up to the podium, casting shadows that danced ominously behind us. Without preamble, I launched right into my opening salvo. Good evening, everyone. I wish I could say I gathered you all here tonight under better circumstances, but the situation we are facing is one of great consequence. My eyes swept the crowd, taking in the rapt expressions locked onto me, before continuing in a voice that carried firmly to the rafters. Many of you are already aware of my husband Harlan's ambitions to demolish my family's ancestral farmhouse in order to build a luxury rehabilitation center. I paused, letting the weight of that statement hang in the air as cries of outrage rippled through the crowd. Seizing the momentum, I pressed on, voice rising with conviction. What you may not know are the depths of deceit, fraud, and manipulation Harlan stooped to in order to make this happen. Evidence we have uncovered shows a long pattern of shady dealings, underhanded tactics, and blatant lies, all in the name of lining his pockets at the expense of our community and my family's heritage. A hush fell over the auditorium as I reached into my blazer pocket and extracted a thick manila folder, holding it aloft for all to see. In here are documents, financial records, communication trails, all detailing Harlan's litany of moral and potentially criminal transgressions, from money laundering and backroom deals with known fraudsters, to pretending to be the sole owner of the property while actively working to cut me out and dissolve my legal claim. Gasps and murmurs exploded around the auditorium, shock and disdain on every face. I pressed my advantage, pitching my voice to be heard over the din. This man is a charlatan and a criminal who has lied, deceived, and undermined every step of the way in his blind greed. Are we going to let his toxicity ravage the very soul of our community while he gets away with it? No. The crowd roared as one, a deafening chorus of outrage. From the side of the stage, I saw Harlan finally stumble in, eyes wild and face flushed. He had clearly caught wind of our little truth rally and come to do damage control. Too little, far too late. "You lying bitch," he snarled as realization dawned, fight eyes bulging. "You can't do this. I'll bury you for this, I swear." "Save it, Snake." Alicia's voice cut through the commotion like a whip crack as she strode forward, holding up a hand to silence the angry mob. "We've got you dead to rights on a laundry list of charges. From shady business dealings to criminal fraud, you're going to be lucky if you don't end up in prison after this is through." Harlan looked around wildly, seeming to finally grasp just how tenuous his situation had become. I watched with cold satisfaction as the blood drained from his face. "Give it up, Harlan," I stated, my voice dripping with contempt. "Your shit show of lies and deception is over. The jig is up. Everyone can see you for the duplicitous, bottom-feeding scumbag you truly are." His mouth worked uselessly for a moment before snarling, pointed a quivering finger at me. You'll regret this, Alara. You hear me? This isn't over by a long shot." But his threats rang hollow, drowned out by a thunderous wave of boos and jeers cascading from the enraged townsfolk. As security finally arrived to escort the ranting Harlan away, I stood tall and fixed him with a look of pure, undisguised loathing. I had dismantled every last one of his lies and defenses. For the first time, he was utterly defenseless against the consequences of his villainy, and I was going to savor every damn second of his well-deserved downfall. After the explosive community meeting, Harlan's world came crashing down in spectacular fashion. You didn't need a crystal ball to see the karmic reckoning that was barreling towards that contemptible snake. Within days, the avalanche of press coverage exposing his vast array of fraud and deception caused a catastrophic domino effect. Investors and business partners scattered like roaches, suspending dealings and distancing themselves from the deepening pit of scandal. Banks froze his assets and lines of credit pending multiple investigations. The rehab center project laid in ruins, all permits revoked amidst the firestorm. And that was just the financial devastation. As the lurid allegations piled up, everything from laundering money for offshore drug cartels to funneling bribes through phony construction funds, the legal walls closed in with terrifying swiftness. Furious investors filed a wave of lawsuits demanding Harlan's head, while the district attorney's office secured a grand jury indictment on nearly 24 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and more. You could practically smell the stench of desperation emanating from Harlan as it all unraveled before his eyes, thanks to his own rampant arrogance and greed. "You'll pay for this, Alara," he'd frequently screech at me in chilling displays of rage, spittle flying. "You'll rue the day you started this war. I'll make sure you end up destitute and alone, living in that piece of crap farmhouse." All I could do was sneer back at his pathetic flailings, enjoying every agonizing second of his meltdown. "Is that so?" I'd reply calmly, basking in his manic fury. "Last I checked, I'm the one who still has custody of the kids, financial security, and the deed to that crap farmhouse you were ready to demolish. You, on the other hand..." I leaned back, eyeing his disheveled, unraveling appearance. "Well, you seem to be doing a fine job of self-destructing all on your own." I'd leave him to stew in his own toxic cesspool of hatred while I moved full steam ahead with reclaiming my family legacy. With Harlan's nefarious ambitions now a smoldering wreckage, it was full steam ahead on restoring the precious farmhouse to its former glory, to honor my parents' memory and provide a revitalizing community gathering place. Of course, Harlan tried every desperate gambit imaginable to regain some semblance of leverage or control. Mostly pathetic smear tactics and attempts to turn Dax and Ivy against me through vile manipulation. But his venom had lost its bite. The kids saw him for the soulless, morally bankrupt specimen he truly was. In the end, His towering ego crippled him when it came time to negotiate custody and divorce terms. While my team played hardball to rightfully secure nearly everything, Harlan was too poisoned by spite to make any logical capitulations. He pathetically tried to contest Alicia's ironclad case for how much punishment he deserved, ranting and raving about unfair treatment, as each ruling systematically stripped him of money, property, and professional clout. I'd be lying if I said I didn't take immense satisfaction in watching that surly worm finally receive his comeuppance. It was nothing less than he deserved after so selfishly trying to burn down my family's treasured history in his warpath of greed and vanity. As for me, I rebounded splendidly from the wreckage Harlan left behind. Thanks to the groundswell of local support and Alicia's legal mastery, my claim to the farmhouse was solidified while my nursing credentials remained unblemished. The perfect foundation on which to execute my new vision for the revered property. With the community's help, the farmhouse underwent a transformation into a rustic but vibrant wellness center, offering holistic services, community events, and opportunities for local youth to connect with their rural heritage. A living embodiment of the values my parents instilled in me, allowing their hard-won legacy to be reborn into something even more meaningful. As for Harlan, his fall from grace was as brutal as it was deserved. The walls finally closed in with an 18-year prison sentence after his high-profile trial laid bare the full extent of his sociopathic depravity. His professional reputation was left in permanent ruin, reduced to a cautionary tale. One final delicious bit of karma? Dax and Ivy leveled him with chilling silence when he tried to grovel for their sympathies with smarmy calls from prison, the once infallible master manipulator unable to wriggle his way back into their good graces. After everything, that smug, soulless charlatan got exactly what he deserved, a life torn asunder by his own corrosive deceptions and greed. While I had risen from the rubble he tried to leave me in, creating new hopes and dreams from the foundations he aimed to destroy. Perhaps there was such a thing as justice and karma in this world, after all. All it took was the unstoppable force of a mother's love, fueled by the righteous determination to protect her family's sacred legacy. It was a crisp autumn morning when we held the grand reopening ceremony for the revitalized farmhouse, now christened Willow Creek Wellness Center. Though Harlan's scorched earth campaign had left the property in desperate need of repairs and renovations, we had persevered to breathe new life into my family's cherished legacy. As I stepped up to the podium that day, surrounded by the beaming faces of the townspeople who had rallied behind me, I couldn't help but feel immense pride at what we had achieved together. This wasn't just a new chapter, but a hard-won resurrection from the ashes of Harlan's selfish ambition. To all of you here today, words can't express how grateful I am for your support over these past months, I began, my voice wavering slightly with emotion. When faced with the very real threat of seeing this farmhouse, a piece of my family's heart and soul, torn asunder in the name of greed, you stood united. You stood for the importance of preserving our community's history and values. I paused, feeling Dax and Ivy's reassuring presence beside me as the crowd cheered their affirmation. In that moment, the nightmare of Harlan's betrayal felt like a distant specter, no longer able to diminish this hard-fought victory. Thanks to your resilience and refusal to let corporate excess trample on what makes this town great, we have reclaimed this invaluable space, I continued, fresh conviction rising in my voice. No longer will it serve as a monument to one man's ego, but as a place of healing, of unity, of rediscovering our roots. Willow Creek will be our community's lighthouse, a sanctuary where we can reconnect with ourselves, our neighbors, and the unbreakable threads that have bound us together for generations. More roars of approval and thunderous applause. Despite Harlan throwing everything he had at trying to divide and conquer us, his scorched earth tactics had only galvanized the community's strength and resolve. Karma indeed was a harsh mistress. After the ribbon cutting, I took time to greet and personally thank as many well-wishers as possible. From Alicia, whose legal prowess had been invaluable, to Jacqueline and my other nurses-turned-warriors on the front lines, so many rallied to this cause when Harlan thought he could steamroll right over my family's legacy. Speaking of that wretched snake, I couldn't help but smirk thinking about how he was spending this beautiful day. rotting in a dingy cell, I'd wager, still trying in vain to wrap his mind around how I'd outmaneuvered him at every single turn. Let him stew and boil over with hatred. I had emerged from his smear campaign completely vindicated, stronger than ever before. And surrounding me now was a living, breathing symbol of that, the culmination of my parents' lifelong efforts and my own perseverance in the face of cruelty. He never stood a chance against you, did he? I turned to see Dax watching me with an odd look of contemplation, perhaps sensing where my mind had drifted. Before I could reply, Ivy sidled up and playfully nudged her brother. Are you kidding? I figured Mom would bury that jackass from the moment his stupid scheme came to light. Oh, ye of little faith, I chuckled, pulling them both into a tight embrace. To be fair, even I wasn't certain I had the fortitude at first to wage this war, but when I saw the two of you standing by me without hesitation, everything became clear. I pulled back, holding them at arm's length as memories of those initial dark days flashed in my mind's eye. When Harlan's true nature was laid bare, when he tried to strip me of my identity and destroy everything our family holds dear, that was when I knew this fight was about so much more than just a property deed. It was about not letting that soulless parasite kill the spirit and legacy your grandparents bestowed on me. Dax and Ivy exchanged knowing looks, seeming to gain a deeper understanding of the cataclysmic forces that had been unleashed. I may have dealt the decisive blows, I continued solemnly, but it was our united front as a family that gave me the strength and determination to dismantle his poisonous schemes piece by piece. Without you two by my side, righting Harlan's wrongs may have broken me. For a long moment we stood in silence, a tear glistening at the corner of my eye as I absorbed the symbolic weight of the sprawling farmhouse campus surrounding us. It would never again serve as a monument to greed, consumed by one man's vanity. No, this place had been reborn, a living, breathing embodiment of the values that could never be erased, no matter how viciously they were attacked. It stood as testament to the unbreakable endurance of family, of truth, and of carving our own legacies in defiance of those who tried to steal them away. And I couldn't have asked for a greater triumph to call my own.